Risk mitigation is something every multifamily investor has to pay attention to. And one of the best ways to do that is to be able to predict what's happening at your properties. Today, we sit down with Nadav Schnall, and he shares how he's using risk mitigation as a service to help other multifamily investors identify potential leaks and other threats that could harm your multifamily property. If you want to learn how to be more proactive, take control of your assets, and mitigate risk, check out this conversation right here on Multifamily Insights. Nadav Schnall brings unique perspective to multifamily technology adoption, having lived the challenges from both sides. Now, with 10 years as a VP of luxury properties and new development at FirstService Residential, he co founded ProSentry to address operational pain points he experienced firsthand. His systems have prevented his systems have prevented 3,610 potential insurance claims across hundreds of buildings with zero false alarms and helped one property save $300,000 on their insurance renewal. Let's welcome to the show, Nadav Schnall.
Hi, John. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Nadav, it's great to have you on the show. I went over your bio at a very, very high level. Why don't you take 2 minutes and fill in some of those gaps?
Yeah, sure. First of all, thanks for that great introduction. Nadav Schnall, my background is in property management, so a lot of property operations. As you noted, I worked for Service for about 10 years. Did a lot of consulting for developers and really operational management, hiring, staffing, all those type of areas. I then moved on to working for a service company and building infrastructure, so exhaust systems, fire suppression systems. So really kind of the heart of the building and how it operates, or one of the most important mechanical aspects of a building. A lot of real estate background, and then fast forward, I reconnected with an old colleague and friend, John Rusk, who has been a builder in New York City for the past 40 years. And together we kind of, he had this great idea, and together we put together this company, and we are now in the business of risk mitigation for buildings.
Yes, one, love the background. Sounds like you and John had a great vision to bring this company together. We'll talk about that in just a moment. What sparked you to kind of have that entrepreneurial leap, right? I mean, sounds like you were, doing pretty well in your career. You were developing systems. I'm just curious, like, what was it that made you say, okay, hey, instead of having this kind of consistent W-2 income, there's this idea that I want to pursue?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, there's probably just a spark in you, right? I mean, I think I was always attracted to leadership positions, right? So even within my tenure with FSR, I started off as an assistant property manager and worked my way up until I was a VP. The next company I mentioned earlier, I was a CEO of that company for about 3 years, and so you know, it was always a dream of mine to go out and do something on myself. And so here I am, chasing that dream. I think it's probably just something you have within you, and you kind of just say, hey, I feel like doing it. And then you either, I think it definitely comes with a price, let's put it that way. But yeah, I'm happy that I'm kind of chasing my dream and putting together this great company.
What was the problem you were trying to solve with ProSentry?
So that's an excellent question. We're trying to solve several problems, but to kind of simplify it, you know, as technology advances, day-to-day problems which historically would potentially not have a solution, you'd have to just deal with the outcome and then try to figure out how to potentially avoid that in the future. Today, because of these technological advancements, there's a lot simpler ways to do that. So, our company, what we do is we like to provide a service called risk mitigation as a service. And basically what we have is we've created this platform, and we aggregate dozens of different types of sensors under this platform. And each sensor knows to detect different operational issues that any building really around the world deals with. They may not deal with exactly the same issues, but what we're trying to do is we're trying to either sense these issues before they occur. I'll give you an example in a second, or the second they occur, and notify the operators of the property so that they can avoid damage, right? And that's tied to insurance, of course, which we can talk about potentially later. But I'll take as an example water, right, which is one of our strongest sellers. Water traditionally has always been if not the number one, it's always the top three non-weather related water damage is usually one of the top three, if not the first one. Um, Top cause for insurance claims across the United States. It's probably that way around the world. But that's really it, right? And so you look at something like that and you say it's costing everyone, the insurance industry, if it's a commercial building or a residential building, so it's the inhabitants that either work or live there or operate out of them, and there's property damage and there's all this other stuff that results from a very basic infrastructure need that we have, which is water, right? And then why can't you better detect that? I mean, the technology is out there. How do we make that adoptable? How do we put that into buildings? So if you look at fires, for example, right? 20, 30 years ago, maybe you had fire alarms in buildings, maybe you didn't. Today, talking to your developers, it's required by code. No one would even imagine to develop a new building without putting in fire detection, right? And so water is not necessarily life safety, though we do have life safety items like gas. But it's a huge issue. I can't tell you how many buildings I consulted on and opened through the course of my career, where the developer is just about to hand over the apartment to their residents or whatever it is, and then someone left the window open and boom, a pipe explodes because no one was monitoring the temperature, right? And then you knock out 10 brand new apartments, and it takes months until you restore them, and how bad experience with your new buyers and all this kind of stuff. So there's really, really affordable and simple ways to solve that. And that was really what drove me, at least. So a long way to answer your question.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, water damage is something we know very well. We have a water restoration company on top of our multifamily investment, so I completely understand what you're getting at. You started to allude to the fact that, um, the goal here is risk mitigation, and you specifically say risk mitigation as a service. Break that down for me a little bit more, right? Because those are really intelligent words, but I don't know if everyone understands what the heck they
Yeah.
mean in that sentence together. So, what does risk mitigation as a service actually mean?
Yeah, John, I appreciate you calling that out because in my world and my lingo, I just kind of shoot that off all the time. So, our approach to risk mitigation or to the service we provide is not just a service that we're providing to an end user. What we're trying to do is create an ecosystem between the end user, right? The building itself, whether it's a rental building or a multifamily or commercial or whatever it may be, right? A hotel, we work with all types and all types of assets, right? And then there's another or big organization, which is the insurance companies, right? And they look at these buildings, and an underwriter will come to a building and they will say, okay, here's a building. This is what it's made out of. This is how many apartments. This is how many square feet. These are the mechanicals. These are the exposures. Is it in a flood zone? Is it this, right? They take all this data, right? And they put it together and they create a risk profile for a building, right? And the higher the risk for the insurer, the higher the premium usually is. That's just a very simple, or they may not insure it at all, right? That's just kind of the way they look generally, right? Very generally, that's how they look at a property, right? And they figure out whether they can insure it or whether they would insure it, so whether it's worth it for them, right? And so what we do is we try to mitigate that risk. Because if I just said that one of the top three causes for insurance is non-weather related water damage, right? If we can mitigate that risk or mitigate a lot of that risk in a manner that will really mean value to both the building owner and to the insurance company, that lowers the risk profile of the building. If it lowers the risk profile of the building, then it should, not always, but it should also lower the premiums or maybe the deductibles, right? So if you had a loss, let's say, and let's say your insurer continues to insure you, but then he says, yeah, I'll insure you and we can keep all your deductibles the same because you haven't had losses in all those perils. But then you have water damage. So that I'm going to give you a $500,000 deductible for insurance for any kind of water damage. So you're essentially self-insuring, right? Unless you have a huge disaster. Anything up to $500,000, you'd have to pay for out of pocket, or you at very least would have that deductible. And so sometimes it's not even a premium thing. Sometimes it's just a matter of lowering that deductible so it's something a bit more affordable in case you have that kind of damage. And so when we say risk mitigation as a service, we are providing you a service of mitigating your risk, whether it's gas, whether it's oil, whether it's water, temperature, humidity, rodents, environmental issues, mechanical issues. We have sensors for all these different types of perils within a building, and we try to mitigate that for you.
So You mentioned sensors, and I'll come right back to that, right? When we talk about risk mitigation, you gave the example of like understanding your insurance premium, your deductibles, and how the insurance companies are going to look at the level of risk for the property. And by bringing in the right risk mitigation partners, you could, in theory, lower that level of risk. So, playing back what you said, if companies work with you, investors work with you, or services like this, they could then show that to the insurance company and say, hey, it's actually less risky because we have this in place, and that should actually save them money in regards to either their premiums or their deductible, so that it's there's more money going to the bottom line. One, did I capture that correctly?
100%.
Okay.
Yeah, and 100%.
Okay. So now let's talk about the how you do that, because you start talking about rodents and some other stuff. And I'm like, wait a minute. So let's just stick to water right now, because I think
Yeah.
that's simple enough for us to understand. You mentioned sensors. What does that look like in practicality?
Yeah. So let's try to take it a high level for a second. So from a system perspective, components that a building would receive, there are two components, right? Typically, there's the sensor, sensing technology itself. There's different form factors, um, but there's the sensing technology itself. It's the sensor, and I'll show you. I'll just put one of my sensors, and so I'll be able to show it to you. Um, but you basically, a property here is one of our best-selling sensors, right? So it looks like maybe like a lollipop stick, you would say, or something like that. I don't know. Everyone has it as a different association when they see it. But this device right here senses both temperature and water. And so this device can get placed in various locations, right? Maybe behind a toilet, maybe under a sink and under a dishwasher, you name it, any water fixture area, easy to conceal. So that's one component. The second component you'll receive is a gateway. Gateway is probably about this big. It's what you would say the equivalent of a router, let's say, more or less, that anyone has in their home. And what that does, it emits a signal. We work on a different technology. I'm happy to talk about that if you'd like. A different technology than Wi-Fi. It's called LoRaWAN. And basically, it creates an independent network within the building that all the sensors communicate on. The huge advantage of that is that, indifferent than Wi-Fi, it emits a very, very strong signal. So whereas on Wi-Fi, if you have your apartment, you have a router in your apartment, maybe you cover 2 rooms, 3 rooms, maybe an entire floor, right? But if you're living in an apartment building, you go 2 floors above, 2 floors below, you no longer have connectivity, right? These devices are the opposite. They do very, very strong signal for very, very small packets of data. So whereas Wi-Fi, we can have this full conversation over Wi-Fi, you can't do that in LoRaWAN, but what you can do is communicate for very, very long distances. So you have these small devices, you put one and it covers 4, 6, 8 floors maybe. So you just put that in, and then all these sensors automatically connect, and then you have this internal sensor sensing technology within the building. You can have thousands of sensors all communicating on this platform. So that is from a hardware perspective what you would receive.
And the hardware, that sensor itself,
hmm
is that detecting leaks, or what exactly is it detecting?
Yeah. So this specific one detects, first of all, temperature, right? So depending on where you are, maybe in warmer climates, not that critical for you. Colder climates, 100%, right? You have like the example I gave earlier, right? You put this in an apartment, and you say, oh, okay, it's 60 degrees. All right, it's a little cold, but that's fine. I can live with it. All of a sudden, you get a notification that you're at 50 and it's, minus whatever outside. You can be, okay, that's not a good sign. We're going to have frozen pipes. And so that's one thing. So it does that. The second thing is that it has different locations on it. And the minute it comes in touch with any type of moisture, water, whatever, at the first sign of water, literally within a second, it will send a notification to our platform, which will in turn process the notifications. We have various ways of informing our end users, anything from text messages to emails to in-app notifications, but most importantly, live operator calls. We have a live operator call center that will call you, John, and anyone else you put on your call list and say, hey, John, we just got a water notification for apartment 22B at the kitchen sink, let's say. And that whole process takes under a minute. So literally from the second you have, and a lot of these leaks, they don't just start by like gushing water, right? You usually have some kind of drizzle or whatever it is, and you'll have a little bit, or even if you have an overflowing tub, so you start coming out. But if you have a notification within a minute, you may even be in the other room, right? Oh, you forgot the tub on. That happens to everyone. So it's a lot of ways to get notified very, very quickly.
No, I appreciate you sharing that, right? This is one of the things that often gets overlooked, but those folks who have a portfolio, you know how important it is to have this kind of detection service, right? So, could be leak detection, could be other detection services where you're trying to understand water usage. I've had deals in properties where we knew our water bill was high, had no idea where that usage was coming from, and trying to play detective to figure that out. It took a lot of time, exhausted a lot of resources, and ultimately it was a pretty big investment to figure out what was actually leaking, where the leak was coming from, and sometimes we never even figured out where it was coming from, right? So that's something that can certainly help. And the reason this is important, right? It's twofold. It's yes, we want to save water, try to be as efficient as we can be, but as investors, you want to drive that NOI, and a lot of times managing your expenses more effectively can do wonders for boosting NOI. Even if your tenants pay for utilities, like if they're paying way more than they think they should be paying, that's a reason for them to move, right? If they're spending a lot of resources, their utility bills are higher than what they've anticipated, that's a good reason for them to look for a new apartment when their lease is up. So part of this is retention, part of this is for your own NOI, but it's important to have kind of these measures in place to really drive more efficient operation. We've talked a lot about kind of water right now, water leaks. I think people generally understand that. Walk me through some of the other applications because you mentioned rodents, and I'm like, what kind of rodent sensor do you have?
So yeah, great. So a lot of it. First of all, one thing that came to mind with what you just said, right, which is like maintaining tenants and making sure they get renewals and rentals. And so one of the sensors we've developed and put on our platform, and we're starting pilot programs with it right now, is a smoke and vape detector. And this was actually something that we came up with because of one of our investors who happens to be a real estate owner and developer, right? And he said one of the reasons he's out on the west side. He said one of his biggest challenges with tenant retention is smoking, right? People saying, "Hey, my neighbor's smoking," and you go to the neighbor and you say you're smoking. He's like, "I don't smoke. I don't smell anything. I don't smell anything." And so we've developed a smoke and vape detector for those buildings that put together rules that you either cannot smoke or you cannot smoke in certain areas or you just want to prove. We have a very discreet small sensor that you can put around your property, and it will tell you, right? It's great for hotels. It's great for a lot of these no smoking environments, and you can really tell what's going on, or maybe even for common areas. So we can do that. We have rodent traps, right? It's literally a little box. I'm in front of me, but it's a little box that a rodent will come in and it will catch the rodent. And as soon as a rodent is caught, it will tell you and say, "Hey, a rodent was caught." Now, you may say, "Well, why would you use that? Who would you use that? And what use case would that be used?" And so one of the use cases, and I will not tell you the name of the restaurant, but a well-known restaurant, they had construction going on next door, and all the mice in that building started coming in, and they had guests, and they had these mice running all of a sudden through because they're making all this noise. And so we were able to get them these devices, and literally within the first day of installing it, we were able to catch something like 16 different mice. And the good part about it is not, you don't have to wait and then go run around the traps and check and say, "Hey, did I catch something? Did I not?" It just lets you know right away, so you're able to take action right away. So that's another type of sensor we have. Oil, right? For those mechanical spaces and some other areas, we have oil detection. Humidity. So we talked about temperature before, right? So for more warmer clients, right? Florida, again, developers, you put in these brand new floors, and all of a sudden things start to buckle, and you're like, "Wait, what's going on?" And are you keeping the right levels of humidity in the space after you've delivered it? Right? It takes a couple of years until the floors settle in. So literally all these type of sensing technologies that we have on our platform have all been developed from conversations with people like yourself, or building supers or engineers or that. And they're like, "Hey, can you help me with this solution or another? This is another thing." And so we've come together, we put our minds together. There's sensors out there for almost anything that you can think of. How do you just put it on the platform? How do you make it easily accessible and affordable? And that's the way to do that.
Nadav, talk about it from the investor perspective, right? This all sounds great. We love being able to identify and have that predictive analysis of what's going on and be able to mitigate these things before they become bigger issues. The big question comes down to money. So, what are we talking about from an investment, and how do you kind of measure the return on that investment?
Great question. So You mentioned the number one term, right, that investors care about, right, which is NOI. And so there's a couple of ways how we can help that. The first is, may sound obvious, but it's a little bit harder to quantify, which is how much damage do you have a year, right? How many leaks do you have a year, and how does that affect your property, right? Because there's a couple of effects. There's one, the cost to repair, which is one thing, but maybe that doesn't really help your NOI. You don't really factor that into your budget in the same way. That's one thing. There's tenant retention. There's the money that you have to pay for relocation and the tenant experience. So those are kind of the obvious. But I think the big kicker here is really on insurance, and that varies from property to property. From an investment perspective, we'd want to see. I think there's two different policies we can help with typically off the bat, right? Which is the underlying commercial property insurance, right? And that again, it varies from carrier to carrier. But many times we can help there, right? So we can help lower insurance rate. Certainly, if there's a building that's in an E&S market, right, excess and surplus market, as opposed to an admitted carrier, that is typically one of the things we can help. Which is once we lower risk, it's easier to get into admitted carriers, which are typically lower rates. So that's great. And then also during the process of construction, right? Your builder's risk policy to be able to put in these devices during construction, right? When you potentially are at highest risk, right? You're exposed to the elements, maybe you haven't closed everything, so on and so forth. So that's one of the areas. One of the devices, by the way, that we haven't mentioned earlier, but would be potentially very interesting to your investors, are automatic water shuttle valves, right? So a valve that actually reacts immediately once one of the sensors comes in touch with water. And you can decide whether you want to do that and have it operate all the time, or only operate maybe over the weekends when no one's at the property. Maybe you just want to be, um, you know, proactive about it and shut off the water to the property when no one's there, right, overnight. And so we have those types of properties as well. So that's a little bit about how we can help from a cost savings perspective. As far as an upfront cost, that varies, of course, on the amount of sensors and how many apartments we have. But typically, the cost of a sensor is anywhere from $70 to $80 per sensor, depending on the form factor. And then the ongoing maintenance of that is around between $1 to $1.50 per sensor per month. So that's more or less what you're looking at. So if we're talking about a residential setting, right, and we're saying, okay, what does it cost me for an apartment? So for a classic one-bedroom apartment, maybe you're talking about $300, $400, right, per apartment, including the network, including everything. And then on an ongoing basis, you may be talking about $5, $6, $7 a month. That's kind of where the prices start off.
And this works for residential or smaller portfolios, not just larger commercial.
It works for any type of portfolio. We are a B2B operation, so we don't sell to individual apartments, but certainly for smaller buildings and so on and so forth, yes, we can absolutely provide service. And certainly if you have multiple buildings, right, and that's one of the things we differentiate ourselves, you can actually see a full portfolio. So if you have 7 or 8 small buildings and you want to see everything on one dashboard, you can absolutely do that. You see every single alert you had, how quickly it took to address it, what time, what was it, all this type of information is all there and all available on the platform.
What is the alternative? Obviously, doing nothing is one alternative, right? You can do nothing and just, hope your bills stay low and pray nothing happens to the property. What are some of the other alternatives?
Proactive maintenance, right? Although again, it's challenging, right? Because we just had a building that we protect and were able to help. They had a spigot under a kitchen sink, right, and it just started dripping and dripping and dripping, and we were ultimately able to alert the building to it very quickly. The resident manager, kind of super engineer of that building, said to us, "Hey, I would have never seen that in a million years." So theoretically, yes, you can go around, you can look at your radiators, you can check that all the valves are okay, you can walk around your building, but there's just so much you can do, right? At the end of the day, if someone leaves a window open, they leave a window open. There's nothing much you can do about that. But certainly proactive maintenance is always something that we recommend. Having valve charts so that you know where the valves are in your buildings. If something happens and you have an emergency, you know exactly where to go and how to isolate the water as quickly as possible. So there's a lot of, kind of 101 property management, proactive maintenance measures that you can take.
Yeah, and I think that's the key, right? There's technology is there to help. It's not there to necessarily solve everything. You still have to be proactive, but you want to keep your eye on your properties. You want to understand what's happening, what can cause certain kind of damage, and proactively get in front of that to one, protect the investment, but then also, again, be more efficient, drive operations, and ultimately drive profitability. So, really great stuff. I appreciate you breaking that down and sharing some of that, Nadav. For our listeners who are interested in learning more, check out ProSentry.com. That's ProSentry.com. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. Right now, we are going to go to our round of insights. Ready, Nadav?
Sounds good. Ready to go.
When you think you found a great deal, asking the right questions could be the difference in finding a stud or a dud. Listen, we've put together a new guide to help you out. It's called 7 Questions You Must Ask Before Investing in Apartments. Now, in this guide, you're going to learn how to uncover red flags, quickly identify underwriting risk, vet sponsors and team members, and confirm key assumptions. Now, this is a guide that's going to help you be a better investor, whether you're an active investor or you're a passive investor looking to partner with other operators. Asking better questions is the key to identifying great opportunities. So download this free guide. Go to our website, casmoncapital.com/7 questions. That's the number 7 questions. And you can access this free guide today. To make it easy on you, though, we've put a link in our show notes. So you go to our show notes, you can click that link and access the guide right now. This guide's going to help you make better investment choices, asking the right questions to build your portfolio. So be sure to download it today. Give me a failure or an apparent failure that sets you up for later success.
A failure or apparent failure that set me up for greater success. Well, I mean, on the most basic level, the entire setup of the platform is something that we did a lot of stuff. In other words, figuring out what types of sensors work for what types of locations. So if that's what we're talking about, just looking at a floor and figuring out how it was pitched. So it wasn't pitched correctly. We placed the sensor in the wrong place. Wire went the other way. We missed all that. And so now we have better tutorials, better explanations, know how to put better placement, and know how to react better in that sense.
Give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for our listeners.
A digital or mobile resource I can recommend for your listeners. That's a good question. Stumbled me on that one. Trying to think of something I use quite often. I don't know. I got to think about that one. Give me a couple minutes on that one. Digital resource. Okay.
We will come back to there. All right. Give me the book you've recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
It's a book called A Zigzag Kid. It's a novel. It's called A Zigzag Kid. You should check it out. It's a fascinating story of a kid and how it just goes through. It's fiction, but it's a great book. I enjoyed it a lot. A Zigzag Kid.
A Zigzag Kid. All right. Give me a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals.
A daily habit that keeps me, well, first of all, I always start my day off kind of looking through whatever I have to go and kind of having a good checklist and a good understanding of what's priority. So priorities are very important. As you run a company, you just have so many things that come in that are unexpected throughout my day, which, by the way, is one of the reasons I got really excited about ProSentry, which was, I can't tell you how many times in the world of property management you plan to do A, and then you come in and there's a leak or there's something else, and you now are doing B, C, D, E, F, and whatever. And so knowing to be flexible when that happens, but also understanding priorities and understanding what the most important thing is and how to go about that.
Give me your number one insight for managing risk for multifamily investors.
Your number one insight about managing risk. I would say the most important or the biggest risk that I think you could overcome is probably water damage. And there's very basic things, even without our service, right? There's some very basic checklists and maintenance items that you can take place. Staff training, right? Having a good response plan. That is a huge risk for buildings. I said it before, right? A lot of insurance claims. I'm sure all your listeners have experience. When I go to a room and I say, hey guys, who has experienced a water leak before? There's always no one who never picks their hand up, right? And so a lot of these are I would say the majority of them are, you could avoid them from the get-go. And so that's where I would start.
All right, I'm going to go back to our previous question before going to our last question. So give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for our listeners.
Fitness app. A fitness app. That's a great way to keep both, and that connects to two questions actually. Because one of the things I like to do, is find out these 20 minutes a day to kind of do some kind of physical activity. So to have some kind of fitness app that can motivate you to do that, focuses your day. So yeah, that would be my recommendation.
All right. And you're out in New York. Give us your favorite place to grab a bite to eat.
Favorite place to grab a bite to eat? That's a very good question in New York because there's just so many really good places. I am going to a really nice place. I haven't been there in a couple of years, but I've been there before. Great history. It's called Cosme, Cosme. Cosme. It's a Mexican restaurant. Great food, great experiences, and a nice atmosphere. So I'd go with that one.
All right. Sounds like a great option. Nadav, great stuff today. A couple things. One, risk management is something that all of us need to be thinking about, not just from the chaos and the damage that could happen, but also just to be more proactive in managing our properties to make small issues not turn into big issues. And the more information we have, especially real time information, the easier it is for us to react and to address those challenges. So, really love the insights you shared, talking about sensors, talking about how we can use risk management as a service, but also understanding, hey, if we can get our insurance costs down, this is an investment that's worth making. So, for those folks who want to learn more, check out ProSentry.com and reach out to Nadav and his team. Thanks again for being a great guest and coming on Multifamily Insights. We look forward to staying in touch with you, and I hope you have a great day.